Welcome everyone to another episode of Pop Rant Radio, the podcast where two pop culture junkies discuss popular and sometimes not so popular culture. My name is Moss, I'm one of your hosts, and with me as always is my good friend and co-host, Eric. How are you today, sir?
I was really kind of hoping that you were going to get all the way to the end and mess up my name.
Yeah, I did.
And then we're going to make you go all the way back.
I did it without reading today.
Right, if you take away someone's script, they're surprised how much they remember.
Hey, it worked out. So, so we're recording again, and kind of like we did for The Rocketeer around my birthday, we get to talk about my favorite movie. Today, we're going to talk about your favorite movie.
Right, and the interesting thing with this one was you had never seen it before, which I was kind of shocked by.
Yeah. There's a guy at work named George. Well, I call him Eric. Everyone else calls him George. Don't worry, it's not confusing. It's not you. But when I told him, I was like, yeah, I watched Amadeus last night. It's a great movie. He was like, you've never seen Amadeus? I was like, no.
Yeah, it's kind of one of those films that it's just you're expected to watch it at some point.
Yeah.
And then you're expected to acknowledge it at another point further in your life.
Right.
Like, you should watch it when you're 18 to 25, and then around the 30s, someone will say, hey, did you ever see that really good movie with F. Murray Abraham? And they'll go, oh yeah, it's Amadeus. And then you talk about it for 20 minutes, and you recognize how great of a movie it was.
Yeah, and it's because it's definitely
something else.
It's definitely a movie that you want to watch a little bit later when you can appreciate the filmmaking aspect and the acting and all the things that you're going to talk about when it goes into the music. Because it's if I saw this movie when I was 10, I would have not been interested at all.
You're right.
But that's the same for a lot of movies. But no, this first time I saw it. And, I mean, it won all sorts of fucking awards.
Yeah, it won 8. It won, directing, writing, music. It didn't win music, actually. That's one of the funny tidbits. They did not think it was fair to nominate it for music.
Yeah, because it's all Mozart.
Because it's Mozart's music. So that's a little bit of an unfair advantage.
I was reading the Wikipedia article on the movie, and when they got to that point, it was the winner of, I don't know if it was best music or best song or whatever it was, but said something he was quoted as saying it's probably a good thing that Mozart wasn't nominated this year. And
right.
it was really good. But yeah, Amadeus, great fucking movie from 1984.
It is. If you haven't seen it yet, definitely watch it and definitely get the director's cut.
Yeah, that's what I watched.
The regular cut was made for theaters. The one that was because it came out in 1984. When it came out in 1984, it's 2 hours and 15 minutes, and it's PG.
Oh, I didn't think it was. I thought it was a little longer than that. Maybe I'm wrong. But
well, no, the director's cut is I think 3 hours.
Yeah,
and something minutes.
I thought,
and it's rated R.
Yeah. Anyway, whatever.
It's a lot better of a version of it. Clearly, it's not like the nowadays director's cut when this one's the better one. Please see it, and you see it, and it's just the same crap.
Yeah, we're not talking about any movie in particular.
Or movies. Or franchise.
Or franchises. Thanks, Warner Brothers.
Right. Shh. They're going to come after us.
Nobody knows. Nobody. Right. I meant the brothers, the Animaniacs. Clearly, that's what this is getting cut.
Oh, there you go. Yep.
This was a bad joke.
Yakko, Wacko, and Dot.
Yes.
Do you know why she's Dot?
No.
Because there's a dot after the bros.
Oh, that's actually really clever.
Yeah.
Now I got to leave this in.
BROS dot. That's why she's Dot.
Now I have to leave this in because that's a clever thing that you said. And so I'm going to appear like an idiot with my Warner Brothers joke.
That's going to be my trap. From now on, anytime you say something and then you go, this is getting cut, I'm just going to put in an interesting tidbit that you're like, oh, I want to keep that in.
Did you know starfish have no brain? Right. Fuck, damn it.
Star Fox gets his legs cut off because of blood flow in pilots.
That is crazy, by the way.
Do a barrel roll.
It is true, though. Look at the original art.
Damn you, Andros. Classic Star Fox reference.
What movie was it that we talked about Andros?
I don't remember. It does not matter.
I don't know if that was this or which is worse.
I think it was this. We're going to go with this.
Yeah.
So anyway, I watched Amadeus, and it was great. And Eric has seen Amadeus many times before. It's his favorite movie. So
hundreds of times.
We're going to let him talk about it because it's awesome.
Right. So Amadeus is, of course, the name of a famous composer.
Yes.
Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart.
Beethoven.
Oh, shoot. Bach. I don't know anyone else past that people would know.
There's only 3. That's
Pachelbel. There you go. Everyone knows Pachelbel. If you don't look him up. He's got one song and you all know it.
John Williams.
Yep. Famous classical composer
John
of the 1700s.
Amadeus Williams.
I wonder what his name really is. Adams. John Adams.
John Williams. Adams Williams.
It's so horrible.
John Bill Williams.
There you go. Correct. So, Amadeus Mozart is a dramatization of the real life, well, somewhat real life events told by the perspective of other famous composers that nobody knows about before they watch this movie, the Italian composer Salieri. Amazingly talented composer. It's kind of depressing as you go through this movie. In the movie's opening scene, we're at Salieri's house. He attempts to commit suicide, and while he's in like an insane asylum, a priest visits him, and he's kind of recounting why he's killing, why he's in this state of mind, why he's such a horrible person.
This is when he's older, and he's reflecting on his life.
He's like in his 80s at this point.
Yes.
And like it even I love the scene where he's kind of explaining it, and he goes over to a piano, and he's like, "Let me play you some of my stuff." And he plays the first song, and the priest is like, "I'm sorry, I don't know it." Plays the next one, the priest is like, "I'm sorry, I might not be familiar with this kind of music." And then he plays something else, the priest is like, "Oh, I do know that. That's beautiful."
Yes, I know that. Oh, that's charming. I'm sorry, I didn't know you wrote that.
I didn't. That was Mozart.
And then we just like dive into this enormous story about Salieri's kind of internal but also external duel with Mozart.
Yeah.
And it's a fantastically done story.
Yes, and that opening scene is really great too, because it really sets the tone. Like, because it's the entire movie is essentially from Salieri's perspective.
Right, which that is a very key element in a lot of this movie.
Yes, so like you get portrayals of the characters from Salieri's point of view, how he remembers things.
Right.
So Mozart appears more childish, and other characters...
The biggest thing is his laugh. That is my favorite part of this movie, is that Salieri, one of the very first notes he says is that he has a cackle, and he feels like the cackle's from God himself making fun of him. And it's like, of course he didn't laugh like that. Like, it's an unrealistic laugh, but...
For sure.
He's you know, what is it called?
Over-exaggerating the details, Right. And that opening scene, you know, just with, like, the music cues really sets up that this movie's going to be a melodrama. Right. And, like, it really hits those notes. And then the following scene, when we get to the insane asylum, it's like an old-school insane asylum.
Right, it's more like a hospital church.
Yeah, it's a bunch of people. They're, like, half-dressed, like, walking around like they don't have their own separate rooms. It's just...
they're all over the hallway.
Yeah, it's like a barn house almost. Like it was just a really interesting opening, and some sort of like visuals that we don't really get a lot in modern movie making, and that really impressed me from the onset.
Yeah. When we first get the introduction of like Salieri's character, he explains why he's into music, and we even get like this really dark humor where he says like, please, he's praying to God. He's like, please, God, make me a really talented composer. Give me any sign, anything, blah, blah, blah. So his dad dies.
Yes.
And he sees that as like a message. So he like completely devotes himself to God. He's going to become this amazing composer.
Right.
And he ends up being, and this is a very old term, but he ends up becoming a court musician or a court composer for, I think it's the Duke of Vienna.
Yes. It's
Jeffrey Jones.
Yeah. It's the Emperor of Austria.
Right. And that was a title back then.
Like,
you were the person that just wrote music for... Can you imagine if we had that nowadays? If there was like a piano player for the president and they just sat in the White House all day just writing music for him? That'd be amazing.
That'd be awesome.
So this whole time he's composing, he's kind of on top of the world. He's seen as like the best of the best by both the emperor and the emperor's council. But he also starts to talk about how like throughout his childhood, he had heard, not really childhood, but young adulthood, he was hearing stories about this Mozart. This, as he called it, a trained monkey who his father pressured him into music, and he like was performing for people all over Europe. Yeah. He's just this amazing prodigy.
Right, because this really important part is that Salieri's father like doesn't like music or doesn't appreciate music.
Right, they were a very simple family.
Yeah, doesn't want his son to go into music, and that's why when his father dies, he takes that as a sign from God saying, okay, now I'm going to bestow upon you.
I've removed your one and only
obstacle.
wall.
Yeah, exactly. And it's made very, very apparent that Salieri is clearly like very religious and very respectful.
Right.
Very respectful of God and very wanting of God to bestow his blessing upon him in the form of composing music, the talent to compose music.
Right, and he even has like a statue that he looks at every time he's writing music, which was very kind of classic because eventually he gets rid of it. But the very next
spoilers.
Scene, sorry, spoiler for everything with this.
Spoilers: Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart was a real composer,
right? And he also died at one point.
He does die.
So,
and it's very sad.
It is really sad in this. So Salieri, in another scene that's just fantastic, I'm going to say this a lot, another scene that's just fantastic.
That's my word, but that's okay.
He finds out that there's going to be a performance, and Mozart's going to he's going to come to Austria, he's going to perform, and I think it's the Palace even, and he's like walking around the room, and he's like, I got to find out who this is, who's Mozart, blah, 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 and he's like looking at the faces of young men, and he's like, would this talent be shown on a person's face? And like, he hears like this kind of scuffle in the hallway, and he goes and looks, and there's like a woman, and she's like running into a room, and she's kind of being chased by a young kid, and like he sneaks into the room to watch him. They're kind of just fooling around, having fun, but it's like the kid's super vulgar, and he's kind of an asshole, and like he tells her to eat shit, which is hilarious. He's like, oh man, what a scoundrel. Yeah. And then all of a sudden they hear music playing, and the kid like perks up. He goes, that's my music. They started without me. And he like runs out of the room, and Salieri's face just like freezes. He's like, no.
Yeah, so he makes the realization that Mozart is this kind of childish playboy, and he was very juxtapositioned against like the regalness of the setting.
Right, he was expecting like a wealthy, like uptight kind of person, very kind of similar to himself.
Yeah.
And here's this kind of douchebag.
Right, because this is the time period where like everybody is wearing like the wigs and the elaborate, lavish dress.
There's like 10 layers.
Yeah, and like, you know, all this grand clothing, and there's chandeliers from the ceilings, and everything is, you know, crystal and jewels, and like It's very, very lavish. It's very extravagant, really. And then here's this guy, this kid, who, you know, he's like, I don't know, early 20s or whatever, but he's a clown. He's a farce, really. Right. But he's incredibly talented when it comes to music. And this just pisses Salieri off to no end.
That's the whole thing with this, is that it angers him how easily it comes to him. Something that I'll get to later on is the way that it does this through music, and I love that. It doesn't just say, man, his music was really good. It starts playing music, and it just shows people's faces, like, reacting to music. And that's also fantastic. Later on the next day, we get Salieri knows that the emperor has invited Mozart to come visit them, so he spends the whole night working on this really great march. This scene again is amazing because it's got a whole bunch of setup to it that, you know, Salieri's like, I'm going to show him, I'm going to write this great march, I'm going to play it, he's going to be amazed, I'm going to get back my status, right? But everything goes wrong, which is another thing that happens throughout this movie, is everything goes wrong for Salieri, like, over and over again. And it's great. So he composes this march for Mozart, and he gets to the palace. Mozart's going to come in. He gives the march to the emperor because he's going to play it, get his status back. And the emperor's like, why don't I play it? Emperor sucks at piano. He's terrible.
The emperor is being trained by Salieri, but he's a terrible student.
He's garbage.
Yeah, and Salieri knows this, but it's his job to help the emperor.
So Salieri, like, in like a smile, is like, of course, I'd be delighted if you did that. I'd be honored if you played it for him. It's like he's like crapping through it while Mozart walks in. And
like you can tell what the tune is, but it's clearly like everything is off key and mistimed.
Right, and like things are being held weird, and like accented notes are really horribly hit. And like Mozart comes in, and he's just like, "Wow, that was wonderful. That was so great." And like the emperor at the end is just like, "Well, here's the piece. Consider it a gift from us for coming over." And Mozart's like, "Oh, I don't need it. It's all right up here." And he points to his head. And like the emperor just kind of like looks at him, and Salieri kind of like scoffs, and the emperor's just like, "Well, show us." And Mozart just sits down and just like, no problem. And even better than he heard it is just like playing through this march. And then he's just at one point like, you know what? This chord doesn't work. What about this? And he starts playing it differently. He's like, what do you think? It sounds better? What do you think? And then he just totally like machos it up and like turns this simple little march into like a beautiful, beautiful piece. So much so that it's drawing in crowds from like outside. It's just like Salieri moment crushed. Like he's just like pissed beyond belief that this kid comes in. He's just like, nope.
Yeah. There's another great moment when Mozart's introduced to Salieri, because there's like 4 or 5 guys that are all standing around, and Mozart's introduced.
Jabba the Hutt.
Including Jabba the Hutt. So Salieri is introduced to Mozart, and Mozart recognizes Salieri, and he's like, "Oh, you did this one specific piece, like that I'm familiar with."
I know your work well, Signore. Do you know I actually composed some variations on a melody of yours?
Oh, really? Which one?
Mio caro Adonne.
Well, I'm flattered.
Funny little tune, but it yielded some good things.
Right.
And like Salieri is just like, "Oh, thanks." And like that was a great moment where Mozart said, "Yeah, funny little piece." Yeah, but I did something with it, so something
Right.
good came
and
out
that's
of
the
it.
biggest thing with Mozart throughout this whole movie is that he's not a bad person and he's not mean. He's unintentionally mean because this stuff all comes easy to him. So when he sees something and he just goes with it, it's of course going to sound better because he's just a better musician. But he doesn't mean it.
Right.
That's what he's been forced in with his whole childhood. So
Yeah.
it's natural.
That's just how it comes to him.
So without much trouble, Mozart kind of rises through the ranks and is performing giant operas and plays throughout Vienna and Austria and all these other countries now, and he's just becoming this big name, which of course is pissing off Salieri more and more. And then Salieri finds out through another scene with Mozart's wife at the moment that not only is Mozart writing beautiful music, but it's like he's dictating it. Which, for those of you who don't know, dictating is when someone plays music like audibly on like a piano and someone writes it as they're playing it. So Mozart being able to write music on like the first strokes as if someone's dictating it is unheard of. Like, that's ridiculous.
Yeah, there's that great scene where his wife comes in and presents, because it's like what happens is that Mozart and his wife, like, they don't have a lot of money.
Right.
Like, even though Mozart's starting to perform for the court and for the people of Austria, like, he spends more than he makes, essentially.
Right, and the big way to make money back then was through tutoring.
Right.
You would show how good you were, and then a duke or a duchess or even an emperor would would hire you to teach like a daughter or even themselves how to play music.
Yeah.
And they would pay a lot more money for that than they would for any opera or any performance, no matter how long it goes.
Yeah, exactly. And Mozart, though, feels like he's above that. Like, he doesn't want to tutor anyone.
Right.
But he also has these lavish spending habits. So at one point in the movie, he doesn't have any money, but he doesn't want to tutor anyone. And then there's a position for
It's the emperor's niece, I believe.
Yeah, there's a position for who's going to teach the emperor's niece, who's going to become her tutor. And Mozart feels like, well, they should just give me the position. Like, clearly I'm the most qualified.
Right.
Clearly
I'm
the
the
most
land.
talented. And Salieri's kind of, concocting things with the other Italian members of the court because they don't want to have anything to do with him.
Right.
Because there's another scene, we're kind of jumping around here, but there's another scene where they ask Mozart to compose an opera, and he wants to do it in German.
He wants to do Figaro.
Yeah.
In German.
Well, they don't know that he wants to do Figaro yet. They just know that they want to do an opera in German.
Right.
The Figaro reveal comes later on. That's a big thing as well. And so the Italians are like, oh, opera's never in German. Opera's clearly in Italian. Like, that's the best language.
Language of love, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah, and Salieri wants to get rid of him just because he doesn't want to be shown up.
Right, he needs no competition.
Right, he doesn't want this other competition, this better composer. So he's kind of heading up the people that decide who's going to teach, and Mozart feels like he's above it. So Mozart's wife brings in some of Mozart's work to show Salieri and is like, my husband doesn't know I'm here. We really need this position. Like, here's his work. Like, do you think it's good enough? And this was another moment that I thought was brilliant. It was when
the moment with the folder and everything.
Yes.
It's amazing.
So there's this folder. It's like the portfolio of Mozart's work, and like Salieri opens up and he's looking through it. Two things happen. Number one, he starts talking about how there's no corrections.
Right.
There's
no
no
scratch out,
edits.
No pen notes,
yeah,
nothing.
It's just like you were
They're
saying,
originals.
He's dictating. Like, he's just, the music is coming in his head and he's just writing it like fully formed and perfect without having to do any edits or any work on it whatsoever. And this was so great. As he's flipping through the portfolio, when he gets to a new sheet of music, that music starts to play.
Yes.
So it's in his head. Like, Salieri can read it because he's classically trained to read music. So he can read it, and in his head, it's playing. So it's playing for us, the audience. It's so well done.
Right, and he's looking for a bad one, or he's looking for one that's just not good, and every time he goes, his face just sinks.
They're all flawless.
Because they're all amazing.
Yes.
And he just keeps looking and looking, and he eventually just drops it, because he's just like, I can't.
Yeah,
like,
and his wife's like, well, are they not good enough? And he's like, they're perfect.
Right.
Like,
and that's the other thing I love.
Amazing.
I love that Salieri throughout the entire film is acknowledging.
Yes.
Like, he's not in denial or anything. He's just acknowledging that, holy crap, this kid is like leaps and bounds better than I am.
Yes.
I need to stop this.
Yes.
Or I'm done.
That was also something that I really loved about the movie. Was the whole story is about Salieri wanting to get rid of Mozart, wanting to get Mozart out of the reaches of the emperor, out of Austria in general, so he can kind of be comfortable, like return to what he was doing.
Right.
But yeah, at no point in the movie does he attempt to be like, oh, his stuff's just not very good. No, he like openly acknowledges to other characters and to himself, like, this is brilliant.
Right.
Like, this is like the work of God.
This is why I'm freaking out.
Yes. And that was really interesting. Like, that was a really refreshing take on it in the movie. Yeah, at no point is he like, oh no, this isn't good. I'm trying to lie and deceive him. He's like desperate to get rid of Mozart because he knows that the music is so good.
Right. He just sees this as like a ticking time bomb. Eventually everyone's going to realize this, and then like, I'm done. I'm last year's news kind of thing. Out of nowhere, Mozart's father shows up in Italy, and like, this is getting really serious too.
Ding, 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 ding. Okay, some trivia. This is one of the two things that I wanted to talk about. I forgot this one. I remembered it. His father is played by Roy Dotrice.
Okay.
Who is the narrator, the reader for all of the audiobooks on the Game of Thrones books, the Song of Ice and Fire books.
Oh, really?
And he also plays the pyromancer in season 2 of Game of Thrones that like helps Tyrion get all the wildfire.
Right.
That's Roy Dotrice. I saw him and I was like, "Oh, sweet." All right, go ahead.
He's barely in it, unfortunately. So,
spoilers.
Yeah. So this whole time, like, we now finally have a face of the father who is clearly pressuring Mozart, and he does not approve of his lifestyle at all. He thinks that Mozart's drinking and kind of, you know, gallivanting around.
Yeah, he wants him to come back home and be done with all this court nonsense.
And go back to composing. He just wants him to compose. Like, we'll take care of you at home. You just need to keep composing. Stop this drinking. Stop partying. All this stuff. Focus on what's more important.
Yeah.
Which, of course, Mozart fights back against. Again, spoiler alert, his father does eventually pass in the film. Salieri even makes this comment that he kind of tries to parallel it to his own life, where he's like, well, now Mozart has his father out of the picture. When I had my father out of the picture, my life went through a great change. Maybe the compositions are going to slow down. Maybe they're not going to get as good. And then Mozart releases Don Giovanni, which is one of the most successful operas of all time, and it just destroys. And like Salieri, the opening night, he's up there watching it, and he's just like dumbfounded.
Yeah.
Because this is better than anything he's seen. And he's just like, well, shit, there goes that. Again, this movie is just constantly, Salieri is not winning.
Yeah, he's getting fucked over because, you know, when we find out, you know, earlier that the opera that Mozart is composing in German is Figaro.
Right.
The emperor has explicitly banned that play because it deals with, very loosely, like sexuality and dancing and various other things. And
that's no good in Italy.
and the Italians are like, oh no, we can't have all that. And so the emperor requests to see it, and the emperor's like, no, we'll let him do it. And Salieri's just like, what? Like that was when he found out, like, oh, he's producing Figaro. This is easy. Like, this guy's gonna kick himself out of Austria.
Right.
And the emperor loves it. And Salieri's just like, well, shit.
Yeah.
And then Don Giovanni happens, and it's just like, this is even better. Shit. And
it's realization after realization after realization. And the fun fact about Don Giovanni, here we go, fun facts again. In the movie, where they're performing Don Giovanni is the same theater that Mozart originally performed Don Giovanni on. And
it's gorgeous.
It is a wonderfully made theater.
Oh my God.
It looks like an old-time theater.
Like, all the costume the costume design, the production design in this movie is glorious.
It's a spotless film.
It's so good.
He makes Don Giovanni. Salieri's pretty much boned again, but comes up with this great idea. Mozart clearly is haunted by his father. He knows he's going through down times. Mozart has now kind of sunk a little lower in his quality of production. He goes to work on the magic flute with a friend of his.
Ding, 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 ding. All right, here's the other fact. All right, the magic flute. That part where the lady's like, that's also in The Rocketeer. It's on the radio when Neville Sinclair originally calls Lothar, and he's like listening to the radio and he turns it down. Like, that same part happens. So when I was watching this movie, I was like, this song is in both of our favorite movies.
Yep, success.
When I saw that, I was like, that's incredible. All right, continue.
So working with this troupe, it's more of a comedic troupe, not very much of a drama troupe, and they're clearly working on like smaller theaters, and you know, they kind of look like more of an independent group than the professional giant stages that he's been seeing in the past. So this is clearly a step down.
Yeah, and his wife specifically, like, really doesn't like the fact that he's doing this.
Right, because she knows that they're jerking him around.
Right.
Like, they're not paying him as much as he should be getting for the music. Because he's essentially, like, this would be like David Fincher directing an episode of, like, Jersey Shore. Like, it's someone incredibly talented working on something incredibly below them.
And the other big thing that's going on right now is that Mozart, like you mentioned, with Don Giovanni and then continuing forward, he's haunted by the death of his father.
Right.
The fact that his father's no longer around.
Which Salieri takes advantage
of. And the other thing that is going to go into this is that Mozart is working on multiple things at a time.
Right.
And he's straining himself thin because
Because
of the wonderful things he does.
Right. Because on top of his constant work and constant drinking, he starts to be physically haunted by a physical phantom, which is, spoiler alert, Salieri in a mask, who hires him and kind of contracts him to write this march, this like funeral march. And it's this fugue, and it's a requiem, essentially, in total. It's a giant requiem, which, fun fact, is Requiem in D, which everyone thinks Mozart wrote for his own funeral. He doesn't. He writes it for his father's funeral.
Right. But the interesting thing, and this is revealed very shortly, is that Salieri's plan is to have Mozart write this beautiful requiem for his now dead father, but he wants Mozart to die as he finishes it.
Yep.
And then wants to present that music as a requiem for Mozart. So what could be better than Salieri, the best friend and contemporary of the grand Mozart, composing this beautiful piece of music that will immortalize Mozart for the ages in this grand requiem for his funeral.
Right.
That's his plan.
He's going to steal the thunder.
He's going to steal it, yeah. Oh, it's so great.
It's amazing.
It's so good.
And the greatest thing about this is that it's not confirmed that Salieri, but historically this did happen. If you go back and you read letters from Mozart towards, spoiler for the movie, towards the end of his life, he does talk about a man visiting him and asking for his music. And it's a man who wears a mask every time. And like, it's never revealed in letters who it is, but a lot of people do theorize with a lot of Salieri's letters towards the end of his life that it would have made sense if it was Salieri. So, like, Mozart is running dry. He's, like, getting on his last leg, and Salieri actually comes to, like, one of his plays. And I think it's Magic Flute again. I'm not sure, but it's with that troupe.
Yeah.
Mozart, clearly, like I said, out of energy, wiped, actually passes out, like, while performing. So Salieri, being someone that they know as an accomplice with him, takes him back home and, like, gets him in bed. Now he looks terrible. He's, like, sweating like crazy. His hair's all messed up. And they decide, well, hey, Salieri says, why don't I help you with that piece that's bothering you so much? You just tell me what to do, and I will write it down. I will dictate it for you.
Yeah,
so,
and Mozart traditionally, like, never lets anybody look at his music or help him with his music.
Right.
He's super protective, and that's established throughout the entire film. Like, he didn't even want his father to look at when he was working on Figaro. He doesn't want anybody to have anything to do with his music. So when he acquiesced to Salieri's request to have Salieri help him with finishing this piece of music,
dictation.
It's huge.
Right. So he's literally, like, composing himself to death with Salieri, the guy who has almost driven him to this death. And it's like a really kind of poetic beauty to it when you think about it. But as the night goes on, they get interrupted because his wife comes back, who's been staying with, I think, her mother?
Sure. It's not super important.
She's out of town.
Yeah.
She comes back. So she comes in, and she has a history with Salieri. There's a moment earlier in the film where she agrees to essentially sleep with Salieri if Mozart can get the job, the
position to
job.
teach, yeah.
Salieri kind of questions his, because he's devout religious.
Man
he's
of
not
God,
going to do
yes.
it. So he's about to do it. He's getting tempted, and then he kind of backs out of it really quickly in a very horrible way.
Yeah, it's very awkward. She begins to disrobe, and he just calls his
he
servant.
Grabs a bell.
And he's just like, yeah, get her out of here. And it was very, like, awkward and weird. Yeah, because he was having, like, a crisis of faith type of thing. Because, again, like, he's out to get rid of Mozart and to get back at him.
And the big thing is there is a student that he does have the hots for, and he's going to try to sleep with her, but she leaves his teaching to go be taught by Mozart, and it kind of, Salieri at one point gets this very strong feeling that he's had her.
Yeah, and well, Salieri, because he vows to be chaste. Like, he vows, because God gave him the talents to do the music, that he will be chaste. But yes, he is like in love with one of his students, and he even mentions when he's old, talking to the priest, how he's like, I knew that I wouldn't sleep with her. I knew that I wouldn't be with her, but I didn't want anyone else to have her. If I couldn't have her, no one could have her. And then, yeah, it's heavily implied that Mozart does sleep with the student, and that is one of the other things that really sets Salieri off at the beginning of the film.
So they don't have a very good friendship, like, needless to say. So she comes home, sees that Mozart is, I think he's passed out at this point.
Yes.
And she's like, you need to get out of here now. And she takes the Requiem and she puts it in like a weird like shadow box, and she locks it up.
Yeah.
And like she like throws him out.
Yeah, kicks Salieri out of the house.
And then kind of the most depressing part of the movie is Mozart does pass. He passes overnight, and they just, and this is historically accurate, they throw him in a mass unmarked grave.
Yeah.
His body, like, we have no idea where his body is now. In real life, there's no grave, there's nothing. He's buried with a bunch of regular people who could be criminals.
Bunch of regos.
A bunch of norms. Like, they get buried with this god. But yeah, it's, you know what I mean? You know what I mean? Like, he could be in a grave with like
yeah, but it was very
people.
That scene is very, you know, it's very enlightening, because yeah, like, they at the end of the day, yeah, he was just another dead guy, and the undertakers or whatever, like the grave tenders, they take him out there, they say a couple words, they just throw his body in the mass grave with 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 other bodies.
Right. Throw some dirt on it.
Throw some dirt on him, and that's it.
Yep. And so then the movie just comes back to Salieri, and the priest is like physically shaking, and Salieri's like, "There you go, I killed Mozart," and he gives himself the most amazing title ever. He calls himself the patron saint of mediocrity, and like the movie ends with him like blessing people as he like goes down the hallway and being like, "You're a patron saint of mediocrity. We're all mediocre." And it's just this great scene of just, he knows that his life is over, and that he amounts to nothing in the shadow of Mozart.
He comes to the realization exactly that he was just this minuscule blip on the map in comparison to Mozart, this amazing, this legend.
Right.
And going back to what you said at the very beginning, like nobody knows his name because he was just surrounded by...
He came at the wrong time.
Yep.
He showed up at the same time Mozart showed up, and that's why we don't know him. And it happens constantly. But other fun fact for you, Salieri taught a lot of big composers that I won't go through all of them, but one that everyone will know, Salieri was Beethoven's teacher.
The dog?
Yes, the Saint Bernard. He taught him how to sit. That's the whole story. And then he lived for another 100 years to star in, like, 12 Disney movies?
Is Beethoven Disney?
It probably is. It's probably one of, like, their subsidiaries.
It's probably fucking Warner Brothers.
Piece of shit. But yeah, he taught Beethoven. Like, that's enough to be a legend, because, I mean, I don't know if he probably saw his, like, the fruition of that, I would say. I don't know. This is a weird conversation. It's going to end right now. But yeah, so this movie is just, it's one of those films where, like, everything comes together.
Mm-hmm.
And everything works perfectly. And my biggest thing with it is the way they use sound. We talked earlier with him flipping through the folder. Another one I really like is when, right after he sees Mozart for the first time, they haven't met yet, and he's recounting that he goes over after the group of musicians is done playing his song, and he goes over and he sees that Mozart's left the master, which is the sheet of music that has all of the parts on it. He goes over to it and he's just kind of looking at it. And he's like talking about how he's like, you know, it starts out and it's just kind of this slow churning, and it's so, you know, kind of mediocre with it. But then he's like, and then an oboe. And like, while he's doing it, it's playing the music.
Yeah, the music comes in, you know, to us like, as he describes it.
He's like, an oboe comes in holding that one note, and it only stops when it's taken by a clarinet. And like, as he's doing it, we're hearing this music start. And he's just like, we see not only in the music, and while hearing it, we see in the face of both young Salieri and the older one, just the amazement of this music they're seeing.
Yeah, it's really, really well done. Like, I was really impressed by the fact that this movie takes a concept that, you know, everybody knows music, but not everybody is intimately familiar with the structure of music and what makes music, great, and why music catches our ear and the compositions and all these things. So it was very much in the same vein as like a movie like Whiplash.
Yeah.
Which, great movie, I'm sure we'll talk about someday, but a movie where it really allows the film watcher who may be a layman when it comes to music to really understand the complexities and the work and the craftsmanship that goes into a piece of music. I was really impressed by how they were able to convey that feeling of what makes music so grandiose and so amazing in film, in through the dialogue and through the choices of music that they present, and through Salieri's exposition. I'm able to, as a person who likes music and loves music but doesn't really understand music, I could understand why these characters were so passionate about it and why it was so important in this time period and in this story.
Yeah, and the music, like, the beautiful thing about this whole thing is that music and film are kind of two sides of the same coin.
Mm-hmm.
For every Birdemic or The Room, we get something like Goodfellas or The Arrival. We get these amazing films and these bad films. And that's the thing with music. With music, anyone can write music. It's super simple. LA punk music sounds like shit, but it's still there, right? Or you can look at like Mozart or Beethoven, and they have, minor falls, and they use different kind of chords, and they just have this beautiful rhythm to it, and they write in different key signatures. Because, hey, musicians, there's more times than 4/4. That's the music joke that just went over a ton of people's heads.
No, I get it.
Major gets it. Thank you, Major.
Thank you, Major. We appreciate you.
And it's just like there is mediocre musicians out there, and it's hard for that to kind of sink in for people. And even someone I am musically trained. I've been playing instruments since I was in middle school. I even went to college for music, so I took the terrible classes known as music theory. I know the pain of what Mozart and Salieri look at. And I feel for Salieri's character, because even in the real world, and I think Mozart had this, there are people born with what's called perfect pitch. And perfect pitch means that I can go over to a keyboard, like the person can be on the other side of the room, not see the keyboard at all, and I can touch any key, and they'll know exactly what it is. And they could have never touched an instrument in their life. But people are born with this kind of ingenuity with it. And it drives you nuts. And I knew a kid in college, and Major and I were really good friends with him. And, I won't say his full name, but we called him Laz. And he had perfect pitch, and it drove us insane with how much we had to do dictation, and Laz would do it in 5 seconds, and we would do it in 4 hours. And that's just how it is. There's people that just have a touch for it. And that's what this movie's all about, is Salieri, as talented as he is, and as talented as me and Major are in a different ballpark than Mozart is. He's just kind of this once-in-a-lifetime gem. And, that's the beauty of this film. He will never get to that point as much as he's trying, but it doesn't lessen who he is. But he doesn't get that. And that's his lesson by the end of the film.
Yeah, because he sees himself as the mediocre result of all these years and years of life and all these years and years of training and of work, and of composition, and what's it all mean? And yeah, the sad irony is, he should be recognized for his work. He did these great things, but the movie is all about the obsession of, I just wish that either A, I was this person, or B, wish that this person wasn't there. That way my talent could shine through even more, or could shine through, period.
Or wait 30 years down the line, and then
just freeze yourself.
Right.
Just
go cryogenics.
Just freeze yourself and wake up 30 years later, and it's fine.
Because Salieri was incredibly successful. And I mean, there's even a part in the movie where the Emperor critiques Mozart's music as being lesser than Salieri's, with the famous line, which was actually in a critique from this Emperor, that Mozart's music had, and I quote, too many notes.
Yes.
That's a real critique for his music, which is insane to think about as someone who used to compose, but that's just it.
Too many notes, it's too long.
Right.
Yeah, there's too much of it.
Or whereas a line would have 8 notes, Salieri could do it in 4, you know?
And then, but there's that great line where Mozart says, well, my lord, I used just as many notes as I required.
Right.
What? And then the emperor's like, well, too many notes. And then Mozart's like, which ones would you suggest I take out?
Right. He's questioning his musical style. It's I love it. So a couple other kind of funny things about this movie is there's these actors. I mean, Jeffrey Jones is the Emperor. Mm-hmm. He does a great job. He has the recurring line of, well, there it is.
Yeah.
Which is great, but like that's like moment of silence for Jeffrey Jones and his weird addictions.
Yeah.
That we won't get into.
He was the most people will probably know him as the principal
from
Ferris Bueller's Day Off, and his personal life has had some problems, to say the least.
Right. So also, oddly enough, Tom Hulse and I share a birthday, which is pretty fantastic. Tom Hulse went on to do nothing.
He's Mozart in the movie.
Right. He plays Mozart. He other famously done, which is again kind of odd. My favorite Disney movie. He plays Quasimodo in Hunchback of Notre Dame, and I think that's it. Like, there's probably more, but like those are the only two that I come to mind really quickly when I think of Tom Hulse.
Right.
And then F. Murray Abraham, who is Salieri, he also doesn't do too much of film. He is in quite a few things that you'd recognize him in. I believe he does more stage work, though.
Yeah, for sure.
But famously, I know that he was in the latest Wes Anderson film. He's the narrator in Grand Budapest.
Yes, great movie.
Amazing movie. And his voice, like everyone talks about Morgan Freeman as being the best narrator. I don't think so. Like, just put F. Murray Abraham over any kind of book, and like it's amazing. He could read 50 Shades, and it would be fantastic.
Yeah,
maybe.
It would be a thing.
It would be something. It would be an audiobook. It's like I said, it's all the pieces fit.
Yeah.
And everything comes together, and we're kind of lucky to have it. I know I was talking about this a little bit before we started recording. Like, they almost didn't make this. And to be fair, the director had a really good point. He said no one wants to watch a 2.5-hour movie about classical music nowadays in the 80s.
Yeah, in the era of MTV and
like hair metal.
And all these other things going on. Yeah, it is very strange that the movie was made when it was made.
Right, and how well it was made.
And it was a huge success. That was the other thing. Like, it was, despite what you might have thought, despite, the time period, the era, the things that were popular then, like, it was a huge success.
Right. I think it joins this very, very small list of Oscar winners that have won that many Oscars for a film.
Yeah.
I think it's up there with, like, Return of the King and, like, a couple other ones.
Right. It was just, I think it won 8 awards, like you said earlier. And it's an incredible film.
Yeah, and it was a stage play for a very long time that I can't imagine seeing it as a stage play because the film is just so grand. Like, it has, like, 4 theaters in it that are beautiful, like, untouched theaters from the 1700s, and then costumes look like this play's budget would have had to been the budget of like a AAA movie nowadays.
Right.
With all the stuff they would have to get costume wise and set wise.
Yeah, just like we said earlier, the inclusion of using the original theaters that these operas took place in, and they still, like I was talking about earlier, the chandeliers are still hanging from the ceiling,
right.
and the balconies, and then everybody's costumes and the stage, and it's just it really is incredible, and it's so authentic. A lot of times these kind of movies are made and it's very clear things are a set, or nowadays things are CGI.
Right.
And in this movie, like, you really are seeing these theaters like as they were. They reproduced them as closely as possible.
Right, with people dressed as they would have been dressed.
Down to the finest detail. Also, Kenny Baker's in this movie, R2-D2. He's
is he one of the actors?
Yeah, when I don't remember which play it is, but there's the giant horse and he's like riding on it. Yeah, that's Kenny Baker. That's R2-D2.
Rest in peace,
Rest in peace, Kenny Baker.
Right. Also, other fun fact, Tom Hulse like sat down and learned the piano for like years leading up to this. So in any scene when you see Mozart playing either a piano or a harpsichord, if you were to pause it and like look at where his fingers are, that's the right spot. Like, he wanted to make sure that music buffs who were going to watch this movie weren't going to go, well, clearly that's not him. And with that, I'm looking at you, Nick Cannon, for drumline. Play a snare, you liar. Like, it's just details. And when it works, man, does it work. And this movie is just full of them. It's so good.
Yeah, it is incredible.
If you get a chance, like, get out there, see it, go to the theaters, ask for it. They'll tell you no. Go to your local rental store, get it from them.
Go to your local rental store, which doesn't exist anymore.
Right, Blockbuster. Go to Blockbuster or Hollywood Video and get Hollywood Video.
Get in a time machine.
Yep.
Go back in time.
Not to 1984 though.
Get it on VHS. Buy a VCR. It's probably on.
Rewind it.
Probably on 2 tapes, actually.
I bet it is.
Yeah, because it's the director's cut's 3 hours long.
Yeah, I think that because the Titanic's on 2 tapes. I own the Titanic on VHS. It's very annoying.
Oh, good for you.
Oh, good for you. And how was it?
I own it on Laserdisc. It's great. And a limited edition poster. So like we said earlier on in this episode, like one of the things that you have to keep in mind the whole time while watching the movie is that it's being told from Salieri's point of view. So Mozart's childish attitude, his like way of handling things, maybe the over dramatization of how people react or how much better his stuff is, it's all being told by someone. So it's biased. And I kind of love that idea of it because throughout the movie, Tom Hulce has this horrible laughter. I don't know if we can cut some of it in or something. But
I will.
Like, it's this obnoxious, terrible laugh. And, like, truly Mozart's laugh could have been bad, but probably wasn't that bad.
Yeah, I mean, it's cartoonishly bad.
Right. It's like, I can't even think of a cartoon character that has that bad of a laugh.
Yeah, and same thing with, like, his wife. His wife is portrayed as, like, cartoonishly, like, cutthroat and kind of evil, especially towards Salieri. And, you know, just several characters throughout the film. Like, you could even argue, you know, maybe the Emperor wasn't that bad of a student.
Right. He's like, portrays him as really dopey or stupid when it comes to anything musical.
So, yeah, that idea that everything at the end of the day is from Salieri's point of view, from his memory, and he could be changing the story to make him seem better. I mean, he's telling the story to the priest.
Right.
He's reciting everything that happens, and ultimately he's doing it so the priest will be kind of entertain and understand where he's coming from. You know, he tried to commit suicide, and why is that the case? And at the end, it's not really a redemption. At the end, Salieri
it's just an explanation.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it. It's not a redemption, it's an explanation. Because at the end, Salieri is just like, what was a patron saint of mediocrity?
Patron saint of mediocrity.
Yeah, and like he comes to that realization, so he doesn't complete an arc. He doesn't redeem himself. It's just
he doesn't even like ask for forgiveness or say I'm sorry for this.
He's just like, this is the story, you know, priest, and like,
here's why I'm done. Here's how I did it.
I'm not trying to excuse it. I'm just telling you what happened.
Right. He almost comes across like a Hannibal Lecter kind of character where he has no remorse for what he did. He doesn't even see it as being a problem. He just did what he did, and that's it. He killed Mozart, essentially.
Yeah. It's almost like he just wanted to tell the story, and he's disappointed in the fact that he won't be remembered, but it is what it is.
Right. It's fantastic.
Movie's great. Movie is awesome. Like, I'm so glad I watched it. I'm surprised I never watched it before this, but I thank you for it being your favorite movie, so it forced me to watch it for this podcast, and super, super, super enjoyed it.
I will say it is probably the number one movie that uses music, in my opinion.
Yeah, I can't think of another example
that uses music that cleverly or that well.
Not only is music an essential part of the soundtrack, but it's also an essential part of the story.
Right.
Like the music itself is essential to your understanding of how important music was to these characters and what it meant in their lives.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, when there's a few other films like Whiplash, and I'm sure there's others that I can't think of at the moment, that kind of convey the idea of of music and what music means to people who are familiar and understand music in depth. And this movie does it better than any other that I've ever seen by far.
Well, and also the thing you'll notice is that it never shows you the sheets.
Right.
Like, you never see the sheet music, even when. And I love the way they set it up in the final scene where they're composing. Even when Salieri's writing on the sheet, we don't see it.
Yeah, that's a great scene too, where like
you're
Mozart's like describing it, and Salieri's like, no, too fast, slow down. He's like, no, we have to keep going. Like, that was. I watched a movie recently called A Most Wanted Man, and it's like a slow burn thriller. Philip Seymour Hoffman is in it, Rachel McAdams is in it, Willem Dafoe is in it. But it's a slow burn, but at the end of the movie, they make signing paperwork like really tense and exciting.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what this movie did. They made writing sheet music really tense and really exciting. And I love when movies take like really mundane things and craft a story. I say this all the time. You can write a movie, you can make a movie about anything as long as you write the story to get me to that point.
Right.
And they wrote a movie that makes writing sheet music exciting and entertaining. I love it.
It's so good, and just the way they use it is fantastic. There's the other scene earlier on when Mozart's actor friend comes over and he's like banging on the door, and it's muffled and we can't hear it, and like his wife comes out and she's yelling at him, but all we're hearing is this loud classical music.
Yes.
And we're hearing that because we're in his head.
That's what he hears.
Writing it down. So he's not hearing her and he's not hearing the door. He's just hearing this music. It's not until she says his name that he kind of just snaps out of it and like looks up and the music just cuts.
Yeah. No, it's
genius
it's
level
all,
editing.
It's all great. It's all great. I had a lot of fun. I super enjoyed it. And we hope you enjoyed this episode of the podcast.
And the movie eventually.
Yeah, you go watch the movie if you haven't already. So we hope you enjoyed everything. If you did, you can let us know. As always, you can find the show on social media, Facebook and Twitter at Pop Rant Radio. If you like the show and you want us to keep doing this, go on iTunes, leave a review.
Or we're gonna quit.
Make a rating. Tell a friend. Make a rating.
Program it in. 2 thumbs up, 1 cup of coffee.
Yeah, or something. Tell a friend. Let everybody know. And, keep doing this.
Right.
As always, we'd like to thank Major for the theme song.
Thank you, sir.
You are the man. And other than that, that's it for this week.
Yes, it is.
That's the show. So thanks again, everyone, for listening.
Oh, there it is.
Thanks, everyone.
All right, bye.